Hello, welcome to our webinar on buying clean electricity. My name is Daria Mark. I'm the Community Outreach Manager here at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. I want to go over a few quick things about this webinar. We are recording the webinar and therefore we'll share the recording with you in the next day or two, along with my slides if you'd like to look over or share with others who might have missed it. You'll see in your GoToWebinar panel that there is a place where you could ask me questions. That's the best way for us to keep this interactive. I'd like to know, if there's something that's not clear, I'll address it. We'll have some time at the end for a Q&A, so I'll address it at the end. And it's also a place where if you could give me a shout out about my sound, make sure my sound is working well and you can hear me clearly, that would be great. So the questions panel, in case you do not see it, it's in the GoToWebinar interface that you just launched to see this webinar. And type in a question, type in any comment, and I should be able to see it. Fantastic. And we'll have also 2 polls throughout the webinar. We'll launch one in a minute. I see there's people, we have a good crowd today and almost everyone's already here. So I will start on the first poll. If you could take a minute to answer why you want to buy clean electricity. And if this makes no sense to you, or if you have a different answer that I did not consider in putting together this poll, feel free again to type that into questions. We have about half the people voted. I'm going to wait until we're above the 75% mark just to make sure everybody has a chance to respond. And fantastic. All right, so 90% of you said that you want to buy clean electricity because the purchase helps us transition to a renewable future and a stable climate. So that's fantastic because that is why we're here. So let's make sure that when we are buying clean electricity, the impact of those purchases is the intent that you have. So I work for Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We are a nonprofit. We are pro-consumer and pro-environment. So to do that, we create programs that allow people to make green energy choices. So we have programs on electric cars, for example. We get negotiated discounts from dealers for electric vehicles. So you can get an electric vehicle at even beyond the discount of what the federal and state governments provide in their subsidies. And we have programs such as like Shave the Peak, which is really prevalent in the summer. When we start seeing electricity demand spike at times when everyone's running their air conditioning, so it's really, really hot outside, and the power plants that we need to turn on to meet that electric demand are really dirty and really expensive. So it really helps us if we can notify consumers that this might not be the best time to run your dryer or run your dishwasher. If you could wait until 8 p.m., 9 p.m., that would help us shave that peak and so reduce that electric demand. So that's another pro-consumer program. Obviously, we're here to talk about clean electricity, and I'll get into those. And you can check our website, greenenergyconsumers.org, for more of the programs that we have. So today we'll talk about Class 1 RECs and why that's important and what even a REC is. We'll talk about the programs we have for households, for communities. We'll talk about our New England Wind Fund. This is all connected to clean electricity, the pitfalls to avoid when buying clean electricity, and then the next steps for you to take. So how does renewable electricity get to our home? So despite what this picture shows, it does not come directly from a wind turbine that is on your hillside. So no doubt there are some people who are off the grid and have this setup, but for the vast majority of all of us, that is not at all how we get our electricity. And for the record, those turbines would be way too much for that tiny little house. So this is not how we get our renewable energy. When we get our renewable electricity, when we really say when you're buying clean electricity, what does that mean? You're really buying a renewable energy certificate, or a REC for short. So a REC is 1 megawatt hour that has been generated by what we in the state of Massachusetts consider to be a renewable energy source. That is most often wind, solar, small scale hydro, or digester gas plants. There's a few others that are also allowed into that Class 1 designation here in Massachusetts. Depending on your electricity use, per year you use maybe 7 or so RECs. And the RECs are separate from electrons, but they represent the electrons that were generated. And so they can be sold separately because electrons cannot really, that's not like water you can put in a bucket and carry it somewhere. Electrons don't work that way. So they cannot be sold, but the RECs can be sold. And so when we say that we're buying clean electricity, this is what we're saying. RECs come in many different flavors. So just because you're buying a renewable energy certificate does not mean that you're buying a good renewable energy certificate. The Class 1 designation is what is really important to look for in Massachusetts. So Massachusetts Class 1 RECs mean that the electricity is generated anywhere in the New England region, or a couple of the places that are physically connected to us, because we need that electricity to physically power our homes. And so if that electricity is renewable, then we count it for our renewable content. So hopefully this shows up on your screen as well as it's showing up on mine. The utility has wires and there are electrons running through the wires. A wind turbine spins, generates a megawatt hour of electricity that goes onto those utility electric poles and wires that physically then get to your house. But the production of that megawatt hour of electricity produces a REC, a renewable energy certificate, as I explained, which goes into a database. It is registered. So this is key because if there wasn't a way to track the RECs, people could multi-sell them and that would produce nothing. So what we want to do is have a database, and the independent system operator ISO New England has this database of RECs. And when we say, a REC is minted, so it's made by the turbine, it goes into the database, and then it is used to make your house green. So we buy the REC, we match it to the electricity that is used by your home, and that's how we say that your home is green. So that's the path of RECs. That's how RECs operate actually all over the country. But we really focus on New England RECs, and I'll get into that in a little bit and why that's really important. So the sources we have, as I mentioned, we invest heavily in local, and we only buy from the New England region. And so you could see some of our solar fields that we buy from. A lot of the turbines we buy from, obviously there's a lot on the coast because that's where you get a lot of good wind. We have a lot of small hydro projects that are environmentally responsible hydro projects. We just signed contracts a couple of years ago with 2 big solar arrays in Rhode Island. And there's a couple of digester gas plants that are useful because they take a methane that would otherwise be emitted and use that to create electricity. Methane, as we know, is a much worse pollutant than even carbon dioxide is. All right. So we have talked about what Class 1 RECs are. And again, if you have any questions, please submit them in the question panel. I'll be happy to answer them. If they're very, very to the point of what I'm talking about, I'll answer them right away or at the end in a Q&A. So we'll do another quick poll. If you could come back to your interface. Have you purchased clean electricity in the last 2 years? So I say 2 years, if we could be a little bit fluid on that. So yes, through Green Energy Consumers Alliance, yes, through my city or town aggregation program, yes, but through a competitive supplier, not at all, or I'm not sure. So I'm gonna give, we're well over 87% voted, amazing. So last second to cast your vote. And we have about a quarter of the people said that they've bought their electricity through city or town aggregation programs. So I'll get into that in a little bit, what that even is for those who don't know. I'll talk about competitive suppliers. And then for those of you who've said no, I will talk about a green power program and also municipal aggregation, which may be important to you. All right. So we have a green powered program, which if you are not in an aggregation, and I'll show you what that means in a little bit, we have a green power program that is for individual homeowners, office owners, anybody who pays an electric bill can sign up to be part of our green powered program. And you can choose if you want 100% of your electricity offset by renewable RECs, class 1 only. Remember, it's only local electricity because that's the electricity that makes a difference in how we generate electricity in New England and changes our sources and pushes out natural gas. There's 2 levels, 100%, 25%. We do not require you to sign a contract. There are no sign-up fees, there are no cancellation fees, there are no restrictions. If you're a National Grid customer, the additional, and you sign up with us, the additional cost that I have at the bottom here for the 2 different percentages is automatically folded into your bill. If you're an Eversource customer, the program works a little bit differently. We bill you just for that additional green portion separately. So your Eversource bill stays the same and we add a little bit more. All right, so that is our green powered program, and you can sign up at greenenergyconsumers.org/green-powered and sign up for, click the Enroll Now button. There are 2 pages that you have to fill out. We need to know your name. We need to know where you are, where the electricity is being serviced, and then depending, obviously your electric bill number, so that we know how much electricity you're using and then we can match that with an offset. So if you run into any questions, or if you have any questions about anything I said in this webinar and you think of them later on, or any questions about any of our other programs, you can email us. We are all working from home right now due to the COVID-19 crisis, but we are very responsive and work really hard to make sure we answer all the questions posed by our constituents. So if you email hello@greenenergyconsumers.org, we will respond to you promptly. All right, so that is the green powered program that you can buy to match the electricity that you're using in your home or your office, et cetera, anywhere that you're. I just saw that someone asked, is Eversource in our green power network? So yeah, so if you're an Eversource customer, anywhere in Massachusetts or Rhode Island, you can sign up for our green power program. You will still get a separate charge from us. It's 100% because Eversource likes to do things this way. And so they will let us know every month how much electricity you've used. We'll take the kilowatt hour usage. So let's say it's 400 kilowatt hours, we'll multiply it by 3.8 cents, which is the 100% rate. And that will be the additional charge that we charge you every month for matching your renewable electricity, your electric use to renewable electricity. So next we'll talk about green municipal aggregation. I see a lot of great questions coming in, so please keep them going. And we'll talk about, I know there's a question about how to match the aggregation program to the green power program and what that even means. And so I'll cover that in a minute. So green municipal aggregation is a method by which a city or town can choose to take control of their electricity or aggregate it not for municipal use, but for the use of the residents and the businesses that are in that city or town. So when you do that, instead of having your consumers, your residents, and your businesses buying one by one their electricity, the way they would from utilities basic service, you're buying in bulk. And just like Costco works that way, you buy in bulk, each item is a little bit less. What we see with aggregation programs is most often, if it's executed well, the aggregation program can provide a price savings. You're also getting greenhouse gas reductions because of that green portion of municipal aggregation. Now, there's some places that do just municipal aggregation, but we really focus, and we only work on green municipal aggregation, where you can add on top of what the state requires. 5%, 10%, 15%, 20, 25. Brookline went from 25% where they started to 30% now. Some towns have started at 40%. So there's this big movement to using this power of electricity aggregation to make a substantial investment into renewable electricity. And because the aggregation programs run for 2 to 3 years, you are supporting those renewable projects for those 2 to 3 years, and they need that support, and we'll talk about it in a little bit why. Let's see. So if you were part of our green powered program, but your town has recently started aggregation, you can do both if you're an Eversource customer, because Eversource bills those two separately. If you are not an Eversource customer, if you're a National Grid customer, you probably have been entered into the aggregation program automatically, and then therefore terminated our green power program. So it's a little bit of a niche question, but it's important for those of our supporters who were part of our green power program but now have aggregation. So your aggregation program, as I will show here, your aggregation program should come with a couple of different options. If done well, the aggregation program, which is this big green circle, has a default rate. As I mentioned, it's 5%, it's 10%, depending on municipalities' comfort with additional renewables in their mix, and a slight price increase, which is still often lower than what the utility provides. Now that default is where most people wind up. And there's also an opportunity, if you say, oh, I don't want any additional renewable, meaning I don't want any more than the utilities required to provide by state requirements, 20% in 2020, you can, within still the aggregation program, go to 0%, which we don't recommend. But there's also an option that you could go to 100% within your aggregation program. So again, because aggregation programs are buying in bulk, you should compare and check, but often those prices can be less than what even the utility service is providing. So your default rate for aggregation with more renewable content can be lower than what the utility is providing, and the opt-up can be comparable or only slightly higher. So if you were part of our 25% or you're part of our 100% green power program, and now your city and town is adding a municipal aggregation program, and that municipal aggregation program, and this is the important piece, that municipal aggregation program is buying class 1 RECs. Make sure it's buying class 1 renewable electricity certificates within the New England region, because that's how we make change in our electric grid. If that's what your aggregation program is doing, go for the 100% there, because that will, first of all, get you even a better price on that renewable electricity. And also you will be telling your municipal decision makers that there is interest in higher renewable content, that people want transition faster. So the municipal aggregation programs have a lot of consumer protections, which means that if you want to go to a competitive supplier, you may choose to do so. You can opt in and out. You have to check with your competitive supplier. Sometimes they have early termination fees for contracts. So, make sure you really carefully check that, and all in the fine print. But then with your utility basic service, you can also opt in and out without a problem and without any penalty. And if you're not sure what program you're in, but your municipality is doing an aggregation and you know that it's doing an aggregation, and if you don't know, you can find out by putting into a search engine your town or city name, electricity aggregation program, and that should bring up the webpage for the program. There'll be a phone number, give them a call, find out where you are, if you're signed up for the aggregation program. If you are not for some reason, you can opt in. You can also choose your 100% opt-up. All right, so in Massachusetts, here's the lay of the land of where we are with our aggregations. We've been doing aggregation, it's been allowed since 1997. And at that time, only really Cape Light Compact took advantage of that. And they started they started their own energy efficiency programs, and they do a lot of different work. They are light green, very light green, because they only add 1% additional renewables. They could definitely add more. And then there's basically, you could see by the shade, the darker, obviously the darker the shade of green, the higher the percentage. And again, this is default. This is where the vast majority of the people who are in that municipality are going to wind up. We find that people, inertia is a big thing, and lack thereof is a big thing also, so that if you put people into default, that's where most people will stay. The communities that have had substantial numbers of people who've opted up to either some communities off 50% or 100% are those that have made very, very, very concerted efforts to reach out and really get people to opt up and push up. So we really find that the default is crucial. So having a green default is what makes a green aggregation program work. There are a lot of communities here in light blue. That means they're in transition. They've either been approved by their municipality, but that have not gone through the regulatory process. You have to go through the Department of Public Utilities to get approved for your aggregation plan. So they're somewhere in that process, or maybe they've been approved, they just haven't started their aggregation program. And so they're somewhere in the middle, and you could see the popularity of this aggregation movement going, right? So not all the towns and cities that are in the blue shading will necessarily choose a green aggregation, but a large percentage of them will. And it's getting more and more prevalent every year. We see more and more communities coming online. Now we support 13 communities with their aggregation. And this map does not show the communities we support. This map shows everywhere that we have been able to do the research and find out what communities are doing in state of Massachusetts to really show kind of where the state is on this program. The slashes are municipal light plants. If you are in one of the towns with municipal light plant, I'll give you a solution for buying clean electricity next, but we always encourage people to talk and reach out to their municipal light plants and understand what is their plan for transitioning to 100% renewables. Municipal light plants are not even required to meet the state minimum, which is 20% this year, as I mentioned before. So that's some place that they can really make some change. And then there's the light brown and the dark brown municipalities. And those are light brown are those that have started municipal aggregation. They do not have a green default, but they have an opt-up option. So for those people who want to go 100%, they can do that through the aggregation program. We find those numbers to be really low, like 2 people, 1 person. So their amount of renewable electricity consumed by those programs is very low. So we still mark them as light brown. And then the dark brown programs are, there's not even an opt-up option. So the light brown and the dark brown programs, they are meeting the state minimum. So I don't want to make it sound like they have no renewable electricity at all. They do. They have the state minimum. So they're doing exactly what the utility would do. But we feel that they, by doing the aggregation program, which most often, the reason these communities are doing it is because they provide price stability and savings, and they could use that power to add more green renewables. Like even at 5%, it makes a difference. And so that's why we classify them as brown, is that it's really just meeting the state requirements, and we feel like they could really do more. And then we love aggregation so much that we wrote a report about it called Green Municipal Aggregation in Massachusetts. We released it in February 2020. So if you're interested in aggregation, what it means and what savings have been achieved, and what we have all the graphs from the communities that we've supported of how the rates of the utilities match against the rates of the aggregations. So if you are interested in that, I encourage you to read the report, greenenergyconsumers.org/aggregation. Now, for those folks in Rhode Island, Rhode Island had aggregation on the books for a long time, but it was an opt-in program where people had to be signed up one at a time for the program. And as I mentioned, inertia is a thing. And so if you have to sign up one at a time, you're not going to get it. So Rhode Island has recently switched to be an opt-out program where everybody with lots of consumer information, but is added into a default program, and they can always opt out anytime they'd like. So Rhode Island is moving very, very quickly towards aggregation. And if you're right now looking at this map and thinking either your community is not represented here at all, or you want to take part in your community's effort to bring green municipal aggregation to Rhode Island, to your community, please write into the questions panel. I'll put you in touch with Priscilla de la Cruz, who is our Rhode Island director, and she has spent years now working to make this happen, to make Rhode Island be able to aggregate their electricity. And now's the time to become the squeaky wheel with your municipal decision makers. And I know they are all really focused on the COVID crisis right now, but I know that they are also not lost at the fact that the climate crisis is going to be if anything, even worse. So there are things that we can do with minimal municipal input that can make a big difference for our renewable future. And so I encourage you to reach out and work on the aggregation. All right, so we've covered green powered program for households. We've covered green municipal aggregation program, which you could do on a city and town. Again, I see a lot of good questions coming in. Please keep them going. I will, I'm answering a few as I go, and I will definitely return back to this when we've covered the rest. So we have another program in which you can support renewable electricity development in New England. It's called the New England Wind Fund. So it's our, I call this our rainy day opportunity day fund. We use this fund to take advantage of opportunities that come up where we could support development of a turbine. So a developer will come to us and they'll say, I want to build this, and we won't necessarily have be ready to sign, through an aggregation program or through our green powered for some kind of consumer demand, but we need to take advantage of this opportunity right now, because if we don't help that developer build that turbine, they are going to move on to something else, and we want that wind power. Wind is amazing, has amazing capacity, so that we want more wind turbines built in Massachusetts. And we spend $100,000 per year on RECs buying clean electricity certificates, only class 1 clean electricity certificates, in that supporting role for developers who want to build that. By the way, that turbine on the right is the Situate turbine that is now operational, but this is I thought this is a great picture of it being built. And so so when you donate to the New England Wind Fund, you are directly supporting more development of wind in Massachusetts and New England. And we always work for responsibly sited wind projects. We look for those projects and we ensure that they are well positioned. Green energy, so to sign up for the New England Wind Fund, go to greenenergyconsumers.org/New England Wind Fund, follow the buttons for the donate. You can sign up, you do a one-time donation. We encourage recurring donations, even if, $10, $25, whatever you can contribute on a regular basis, because it really helps us make that push, to accelerate that push to bring more renewables into New England. We are not we are not going to meet our climate targets if we stick with what the utilities are required to do. It is not enough. We are not moving fast enough. And we are one of the most aggressive states in New England and in the country. So, there's a lot of work to be done, and we can do a lot here. And so this is our answer to how can we build more wind? How can we build it faster? How can we ensure a more sustainable future? All right, so we'll talk about pitfalls to avoid. If you have any questions, please keep them coming. I'm happy to see so many people participate in the questions. So pitfalls to avoid. So one problem we have been seeing is competitive suppliers. You get a letter, it looks really, really similar to the kind of mailing you could get from your utility, and it's purposefully done so. Or you will get a phone call, I'm sure you've gotten these, that say something like, for National Grid customers, there is a new program of electrical, of renewable electricity or something like that. And so what these competitive suppliers are doing is they're marketing really, really heavily to people, and and that marketing costs a lot of money. And so what they often do is they'll say, they'll give you a great rate that in the fine print, if you read it carefully, may change in 6 months or less. And they do not have to notify you when that rate is changing. And then if you choose, if you sign up with them and then you say, oh, this is not a good idea, I'm paying more, there might be a termination fee for a contract. So there's a lot of fine print that makes this a really poor choice. The other issue with competitive suppliers, and I'll get back to this a little bit later, is that remember I mentioned that class 1 RECs being from New England is what really changes our New England grid and really creates a demand for more renewable electricity to be built, period. National regs do not provide that same additionality. So we call that additionality, where when you buy something, you create a demand for more of it. National renewable energy certificates do not provide that additionality. And so, you know, if you're buying a competitive supplier, first of all, you could wind up paying more. And second of all, you might not be getting what you think you are getting. So you don't have to take my word for this. Massachusetts Attorney General released a report on analysis she did in 2018, commissioned in 2018 and 2019 as an update, to see how much people were paying more for their electricity if they were with these individually picked competitive suppliers than they would have paid on their utility basic service. So if they had stayed with basic service, they would have paid $253 million less than they did to competitive suppliers. So that's $253 million that ratepayers in Massachusetts paid in addition for the very same electricity that they would have gotten through your utility. So there's a lot to be said here for more consumer education, and we try to do it as much as we can. We have a lot of blogs on the subject. If you want to read, go to greenenergyconsumers.org and you follow the link to our blog. The Attorney General feels, and I believe rightly so, that this needs to be discontinued. The legislature needs to take some action on it. But for now, the best we could do is really educate people to be very careful about what they're signing up with, make sure there's no hidden fees, make sure the price is stable, make sure they know what they're getting into. And our Green Power program is the exact opposite of this. You know, we don't change the rate. We haven't changed the rate in years, and we don't plan to. We don't require you to sign a contract. We have no termination fees, et cetera. And aggregation programs are also at the other end of the spectrum. Aggregation programs with the energy broker that we work with have saved $65 million to consumers in the last, since 2016, 2017, when they started doing this. And even with the green aggregation programs that we support, so that's all aggregation programs, they do green, brown, and light brown. But for the green aggregation programs that we support, you know, we've seen even in places that have gone for a high green percentage, like Brookline, people are still saving money over the course of that aggregation contract. So there's a lot, there are really great choices, and it's important that you know what you're getting when you are choosing your electricity. All right. Awesome questions. So let's talk about, I mentioned and alluded to this concept of additionality. So not all electricity plans, not all competitor suppliers, and not all aggregations are created equally. So what you really have to ask in your aggregation or any kind of green program that you sign up for is, will me buying this incentivize development of more renewables in New England? And the reason we have to subsidize the development of renewables in New England is because, unlike in Texas, unlike the Dakotas, we do not have large sweeping fields with amazing wind potential that is nowhere close to housing. New England is dense. We have a lot of energy demand, which is concentrated and great, but we do not have the scale where we can buy 300 turbines at a time. That is until, you know, obviously until we get offshore wind. But onshore, which is where the reality is right now, we don't have that kind of scale. And so what we're doing is we're putting a turbine at a time, 2 turbines at a time. You know, sometimes we've had the large projects in Massachusetts are 10 turbines. Which you can imagine does not get you the kind of scale and the kind of cost as a 300 turbine project. So we here in Massachusetts have to pay more for our renewable electricity because it is so expensive to build it here, but we can only get our electrons from here. So we have to replace the natural gas plants that are burning methane, fracked methane here with renewable electricity and storage and lots of other things. But you know, that is step one, the renewable electricity, the more the wind, the more solar, the more small scale hydro, those are priorities right now. So if your aggregation program is doing national RECs, you are not getting this benefit of additionality. No, nothing is changing. No other projects are being built because you have committed to this program. Massachusetts Class 2 regs don't either, because they are either older projects or projects have been are working in a slightly different way that we consider. So I just got a question: when does offshore wind will have its I'm assuming that means, will offshore wind have an impact? Offshore wind is going to have a huge impact on our electricity. The problem with offshore wind is that it has been stalled. The fossil fuel interests have worked really hard to make sure we don't build any offshore wind, because it's a direct competition to them, and it will directly displace natural gas. And so, you know, and we have a ton of offshore wind potential off the eastern seaboard. You could read, we have a really good blog post about offshore wind prices, and not just here in Massachusetts, but the prices that are coming in, and the projects that are being built, that are proposed, because so far only off of the coast of Rhode Island do we have an offshore wind project. And so, yes, it's going to make a big difference. Yes, it's going to create a lot of great renewable electricity. Right now, we're looking at 2023 to 2024 before the offshore wind in Massachusetts can connect to our grid. So the reality is, we have to press on the lever of onshore wind for now, and solar, and all the things we can build onshore as fast as we can through the programs that we're doing, and then continue our full support for offshore wind, and connect to it when it comes. So I mentioned this price discrepancy between building projects and the revenue you can get outside the New England region and inside the New England region. I think this graph, this chart really shows it well. So we have 3 different projects. We have an old New England hydro project, and when I say levelized cost, is what does it mean to develop it and run it, and all the parts that, you know, the cost of whatever loans the developer had to take out to make this happen. So leftmost yellow bar shows the levelized cost of developing hydro with an old New England hydro project, and then the project revenue. So what are you going to get from the physical electricity that you're selling, and then the tiny little sliver of green on the top is the renewable energy certificates. So you could see that for the old New England hydro project, we do not need to add more from renewable energy certificate revenue to make that profitable. So the same goes for non-New England wind projects. So this is national or out of region, as we call them, wind projects. So same thing. So it costs a little bit more to develop it, but the electricity that, you know, the cost the payment you're going to get from the physical electricity is already higher than what it costs you to develop. So when you're buying national RECs, you're adding to that sliver of green on the top. And now, don't get me wrong, like the people who run those projects, they will take your money. You could send it out that way. But I think it's really important to understand that the cost that you're giving, the payment that you're adding to that, will not incentivize someone to build more, because the incentive is already there. The project revenue from physical electricity sales is high enough that the renewable energy certificates are not needed to incentivize the project. Those projects are going to get built, and they're going to get operational, and they're going to get connected. New England wind projects have a very different picture. I talked about this a little bit in the issue of scale. So you could see that it costs a lot more to develop a wind project in New England. And you could see that with the blue bar to the right, if a New England, if a wind developer in New England went to the bank and said, you know, I'm going to build this turbine, and I'm only going to use the electricity sales, the physical electricity sales to fund it, the bank would never give them a loan, because the amount of money that they would get from those electricity sales is not enough to cover the cost of building it or running it. And so we have to have those renewable energy certificates go to those New England wind projects to make them buildable, to make them operational. So this is what we do. We started in 2002. We signed a 10-year contract with the Hull turbine, which is the first utility scale turbine to go up in Massachusetts. And you can still, we do wind tour, like past this COVID-19 pandemic and pre-COVID-19 pandemic, we would do wind tours where we take people on a boat, or you know, pile into as many electric cars as we could find, and go to and go to our turbines in the different places or our solar fields and really talk about what it means to have this project be here. And so this is why we have to develop the New England projects, because when we sign these contracts to buy renewable energy certificates from Hull, from Scituate, from Gloucester's turbines, we are providing that much needed revenue for the developer to build that project. All right, we have come to the end of my slides. I've added a couple of the links that I mentioned here. If you go to our website, there's a full list of our programs there. If you have more questions, please submit them. I see a lot of great questions coming in. Let me start with your questions at the top. So, and we get this question a lot, how do any of these programs work if you have solar on your roof? So solar on your roof creates a certain amount of electricity, which then gets subtracted from whatever electricity you're using. So if you create 100 kilowatt hours and you use 300 kilowatt hours, you have 200 kilowatt hours left. Now, not everyone is that way. If you produce more solar electricity than you use, you could sign up with us for green powered, but we'll not actually bill you for anything. Ditto on your aggregation program. You could still be part of the aggregation program, but if you are not actually consuming electricity on your bill, then this does not apply to you. If you whatever portion of electricity that you have that's residual, that's remaining after the solar generation has been subtracted, so that part can be matched with our green power program, and that part can be part of the green municipal aggregation program at the rate that green municipal aggregation is providing for you. All right, so I already answered can you combine green powered and aggregation together? So unfortunately, New Hampshire residents cannot sign up for our green power program right now. But if you are a New Hampshire resident, what you could do if you want to kind of create your own green power program, you can sign up for our New England Wind Fund. I would look at your electric bill, find, either do an average or go for the highest electricity month. So if it's 600 kilowatt hours, multiply 600 kilowatt hours by 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour, you get an amount of money and sign up for a monthly contribution to our New England Wind Fund, which, some months you're going to pay a little more, but the point is that you have now created exactly what we do in our green power program. In the green power program, we're a little bit more precise. We match your exact electricity usage, but the impact is the same. And we love contributions to our New England Wind Fund. So if you, for any reason that you find that you cannot sign up for the green power program, we really, really encourage you to sign up for the New England Wind Fund. The renewable energy certificates are bought, and we look for the same quality of renewable energy certificates for all of our programs. So there is not one program that is better than the other. They are all really, really high value. So, and we do this renewable project development really, really well. So signing up for New England Wind Fund really helps us to continue to do that project development. So I have a question on whether, so this is for aggregation programs. So you have to, so how do you know if your aggregation program is buying class 1 RECs or not? So this is a great question. So here my general rule of thumb is that if you are one of the communities that we support, it is always class 1 RECs. So all of our defaults, and you can see that in our aggregation report, you can see all the communities we support. So Arlington, Somerville, Brookline, it's only 3 that I'm of course going to blank on the rest. But if it's one of our programs, it's definitely class 1 RECs. So there's your quick rule of thumb there. Second of all, any other consultants that run aggregation programs, there's 2 other companies, and they, if they are doing class 1 RECs, I find that they tend to put that sort of closer and higher to the front page. If they're doing something different, they tend to, that tends to be harder to find. So what I recommend is look for your community, so community name, electricity aggregation program, and even if your community's electricity program is not called that, the words aggregation and electricity will get the search engine to find that page for you. And then click on the rates. So usually by the rate, you know, whatever it is, 10.6789 cents kilowatt hour, it will say, you know, if it says 20%, you know, if it says 16% or 20% class 1 Massachusetts recs, keep reading, because that might just be saying we comply with the state standard, which is not an additional 16 or 20%. So look for that word additional, look for that word class 1. You can also call the, you know, if you want to really dig in, you can also call your municipal aggregation phone number and ask them, are you buying class 1 recs? And if you're not buying class 1 recs, then if your aggregation program is supplying national recs, you will make more impact by donating to our New England Wind Fund, even $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever you can spare. You will make more impact than buying any amount of those national recs. So I answered, yeah, so we have, so for state minimums, we have 2 state requirements this year. We have the Renewable Portfolio Standard, which I think people know really well, which is at 16% this year. And then we have the Clean Energy Standard, which is at 4%. And the Clean Energy Standard was created to allow us to use either Class 1 recs or Canadian hydro. So that's 4%, and until we have Canadian hydro, which we do not have any electricity from Canadian hydro right now, I'm sorry, we have a little bit, but we don't have the projects that everybody's talking about right now of bringing. That is all met through class 1 recs. So we consider that 20% altogether. So rooftop solar PV is on many homes, and is there a residential wind power equivalent for that? So I've read a couple of, you know, this is going to depend on a little bit in your neighborhood. There's been a couple of people who have put turbines in their backyard. You know, I hesitate on this because it's not, you know, they do make a sound, and unless you have a substantial backyard that has a really good a really good wind capacity factor, you know, that gets to be really, really dicey. And it depends on your neighbors, right? I mean, if you're living in a neighborhood that wants to install its own wind power, then, you know, please come talk to us. We're happy to help you out with that. But if you're alone and your neighbors are going to look, you know, questioningly at this, I would consider solar instead for your home. And again, if neither of those is an option, New England Wind Fund will, you know, like, we will be your proxy for having a turbine in your backyard. So there's a question on solar farms and the solar pricing. So let me talk a little bit about solar and how solar works in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, we've had, and you might have heard this, we had a couple of solar programs. We had SREC 1, which ended really quickly because so many people were interested in putting solar on their roofs, and that gave a fixed subsidy that the utility would pay you for renewable energy certificates generated by your rooftop solar. Then the state launched what's called SREC 2, or Solar Renewable Energy Certificates, SREC 2 program, and that ended really quickly because so many people wanted to sign up for it. And you know, there's only so much capacity that they're willing to allocate, but the goal of the SREC 2 program was to start to decrease the incentive that we give solar, because the price of solar, of putting up solar, is decreasing so quickly. And so the goal is to produce just the right amount of incentive to incentivize the development, to incentivize more purchases, because when you keep buying the same thing, the production of the next thing gets a little bit cheaper. And so, you know, as we learn more and more about how to build solar, then the next solar that we're building is cheaper. And we've seen that solar, maybe you look up, solar prices have fallen substantially, and that's a great thing. And so our goal is to bring the incentive for solar down as well. So solar SREC program ended really quickly also. And now the Commonwealth has started what is called SMART, the SMART solar rebate program, and that provides a fixed rate for your solar depending on what region you're in, the size of the solar array you're putting up. So it's meant to really incentivize everybody from, you know, a tiny, comparatively tiny solar on your roof to all the way huge solar projects, you know, solar farms in Western Mass. So the solar has been, I think, really well subsidized, and I say that because the SMART program was started with 1,600 megawatts of solar capacity, and the Department of Energy Resources was and the DPU were planning that this would, you know, kind of keep the incentive going for about 4 years to 5 years. And in many of the parts of the state, the capacity out of that, the available capacity for that program has already been taken up by solar projects, and it was taken up in 6 months to a year. And so you can see there's a great deal of interest, and there's the right amount of incentive to really drive solar in Massachusetts. And we need more of that. Solar is a good complement to wind. But the challenge with solar, some critics will point out, is that, well, it's not constant. It can't keep creating electricity at night, et cetera. And so what, in response to that, what the SMART program has now started doing is requiring that any solar installation that's larger than 500 kilowatts in capacity requires that they have storage on site with that solar, which I think is absolutely the right way to go. It also builds our solar capacity, storage capacity, so that you know, you can charge that storage during the day with any of the excess solar that you're producing, and then discharge it at night or in the evening or during peak times or at other times when you need that electricity. And so, you know, we need to build more storage, and this is, I think, the right path forward. There's also been some question about whether solar can be built responsibly, especially like, what are we doing if we're covering we're covering great fields and meadows and green spaces with solar. So the program has also worked to address that. They have now added what's called a pollinator adder, where if you seed your field with flowers that are good for pollinators, and there's certification for that, obviously, you get a little bit of a higher price on your electricity from the utility. So that's, you know, meant to be a benefit. And then there's also a lot of tightening and restrictions about conservation land and protection for those, et cetera. So we feel solar in Massachusetts is really well supported and is doing really well under that SMART program. So, you know, keep it going, keep growing our solar here. We need more of it. And so I think we could keep going that way. So let's see. So somebody asked a question if class 2 RECs are like old hydro and projects built before 97. And so national RECs do not provide additionality. They don't provide additionality in New England, and they don't provide additionality anywhere else either. As I showed in the slide, you know, if you're buying a national REC, you're not adding a needed incentive to a developer out in Texas. They're going to build that no matter what, and they just, you know, the extra REC revenue is just, you know, whipped cream on top of their already really delicious sundae. So but New England is exactly opposite. If we're going to send, you know, so those communities that are saying, oh, we're 100% and they're buying 100% national RECs, they would do much better by doing 5% in New England. They would make much more change here because the barriers to building outside of New England are not that there's not enough REC revenue. It's more regulatory. It's buying the space. It's finding the developer. It's the, you know, all those other project management things. And the barriers in New England are finding the space and getting financing and getting the right developer. And then on top, you know, the real need to have a consistent and sizable buyer for your renewable energy certificates for at least the first 10 years, which is about the length of a loan that you will get from the developer could get from a bank to build it. So that's why we love to sign long-term contracts whenever possible, because it really helps to bring those projects online. So someone asked, so if you're signing up for clean energy, sorry, if you're signing up for a green municipal aggregation, sometimes known as community electricity aggregation, sometimes known as community choice aggregation, community choice electricity aggregation. So these are all synonymous. They all mean the same thing. We're aggregating electricity and adding a green component to it. If you sign up for the 100% option through that, so if you're doing it with an aggregation that is supported by us, so again, go to our aggregation report and you can see all the communities, or you could Google, and if your web page says that it's supported by us, by Green Energy, partnered with Green Energy Consumers Alliance, or you can email us at hello@greenenergyconsumers.org to find out. We can tell you if it's through Green Energy Consumers Alliance, then the 100% cost, so the part that you pay for 100% through your aggregation, is tax deductible, because we are a nonprofit and we're not providing a physical service to you by buying matching what you're using with renewable energy certificates. So the IRS has determined that the RECs that we're selling for the 100%, and the ditto on our green power program. So the beginning of every calendar year, we spend a lot of time sending tax letters to our green powered members and to the 100% opt-up members with their tax deductible information. So someone asked me if they live in a community choice aggregation program that actually we support. So in Somerville, we support that. And then should they also enroll in the green power program to double their impact? So if you do enroll, so it depends. If you're National Grid, you cannot enroll in both, because the way enrolling with us would kick you out of, I'm not sure if you would even be possible to enroll with us while being part of the aggregation, but if it, it's all one bill, so you couldn't do both. If, and I can't remember if Somerville is an Eversource customer. If you are an Eversource, you could do both because the green billing is separate. In either case, you can also sign up to donate $10 a month, $20 a month, whatever you'd like, through our New England Wind Fund. And that is, provides the same impact. But it's not, directly tied to the amount of, to the kilowatt hours you're consuming. So, you can estimate what you're going to use. So Arcadia Power, somebody had a question about this. I believe they also, I have to check into this and I'll get back to you, but I'm pretty sure that they're also a competitive supplier that buys national RECs. I don't believe that they are a New England based REC. So if you're in New England, you should be buying New England based renewable energy certificates. Okay, so Somerville is on Eversource. So go ahead, you could sign up for green powered if you'd like. All right, I have gone through all the questions. We're out of time, so perfect timing. If you think of another question after this, please email us at hello@greenenergyconsumers.org. I'm about to close the webinar and finish the recording, but there's also a very short survey that I'd love for you to fill out, please, if you can. It's really only maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the very most, but I think probably even less. So after this webinar concludes, please complete the survey. And I really appreciate your time today. Thank you for taking this hour to learn more about electricity and renewable electricity and what's what and how you can make an impact in moving us closer to a sustainable and renewable future. I look forward to hearing from you, and check out our website for more webinars, greenenergyconsumers.org/events. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Stay safe.